a long-time event of learning and travel. You are responsible for teaching so many, many women how to pray and have a beautiful love of learning. Our trips to Israel were inspiring. You taught us a love for the land. We traveled throughout Israel and so many places of real interest and meaning. Through your leadership, we formed a bond with each other that has lasted even till today. You have been an inspiration to all of us and an amazing teacher. We all want to wish you a very, very happy birthday. May life bring you and your family health and happiness. Love always, your grateful students.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Beautiful.
I got to get my birthday thing out there every year.
We have to get it. Happy
Thank you
birthday.
very, very much. I surely thank you. Thank you all. So kind. Really so kind. Thank
Happy
you.
birthday.
Thank you. Thank you, Flora. Thank you. Very kind. Okay. So we're going to look at today as a culmination of sorts, in that we've spent the last 9 weeks perfecting the kli, building the vessel, so to speak, that would enable us to go to the next level. So my assumption is those who have been in one class and 2 classes, God willing, many of the classes, then you will already have a number of the tools to take the next step. Now, so what I'd like to do today is talk about that step with the perspective that if we hadn't attended all the classes, we're going to reach back to many of the core concepts that we spoke about anyway. So for those of us who are here, you'll have a more complete package. For those who are less in each class, you'll have somewhat of a package. And as we move forward to the next stage of Torah growth, God willing, and personal growth, we're going to reclaim some of these perspectives as well. Good. So we have, so this notion of derech eretz kadmalat, that the vessel, the person, has to be built to a great extent first, and then you start inputting into that person, is something that we should know and we should hold and we should go by. And the same thing applies to our children. If we want them to be tooled to approach their lives successfully, we need to be constantly building that kli, building that vessel. We need to be primarily focused on helping them build their self-love and self-confidence. And that's the hardest thing for a parent to do. It's the hardest thing for a child to own, regardless of age. The parent, as we know, has a greater impact on his child's self-love and self-confidence than anyone, including that person's spouse. So we need to know that in our focus to build our kli, the vessel that is us, we can never lose focus to the needs of our children, regardless of age. If a 50-year-old child and a 70-year-old parent, or whatever it might be, have an exchange that puts a ding in the self-confidence of that child, that's a real thing. Does that mean we don't call our children to task? We certainly do. But it means that our overarching focus has to be the vessel, the kli, that has to be in a good, healthy, emotional, spiritual, intellectual position to be growing all the time. Okay. Now we're going to move to a point that Jane may remember from many, many years ago. I'm not sure. It may even have been pre-Jane, where we taught this perspective to young adults, and it was an essential perspective. People struggled with it in the beginning, and in those days I didn't understand why. Today I finally do. People struggled with it in the beginning, and some of us may struggle with it now, but I want you to hear it and think about it very carefully, because it presents the stepping stone. It's the foundation or the stepping stone to the next stage of our Torah growth and our self-development. And that is based on the words, B'Tselem Elokim Nivra Ha'adam. In the image of God, man was created. Now, there are several descriptives of man's creation, including Vayipach Ba'apav Nishmat Chaim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu not only built us and shaped us, but circled back and blew this extra something into us, which we can talk about in a few minutes. But everyone knows that man is man and God is God. Why is the Torah telling us more than once, B'Tselem Elokim, in the image, in the likelihood of God, in the likeness of God, man was created. Now, we know the term bara, the term used for man, suggests something different than the terms used for the other elements of creation. We know the term amar, that's used with a number of the key elements, light, the different plant kingdoms, the animal kingdom, and so on. We know the term vaya'as la'asot, which was used to further distinguish them, those areas of creation. We know the term vayatzer, vayitzar, which was meant to tell us that God further refined those elements of creation. Each of those are different from the concept of bara. Bara suggests and shouts a unique dispensation in creation. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu already uses that most powerful of terms when he creates us. He already tells us that we're mil'uat ha'aretz v'kivshuha, that we are the pinnacle of creation, and that our job and opportunity is to master creation and build with it. So why do we need the extra? Why do we need this perspective of Tselem Elokim? And from it, we learn something very important that we infused in some young adults many years ago, and that is that the human being is great. And you remember or not?
I'm the shipping label.
Huh? Everybody okay? Jane, remember or no? Or maybe, yeah? Human being is great. I am great. Now, what was the problem at the time when we were teaching this to young adults? The problem was we don't think of ourselves as great. And we think, if we think we're great, then that suggests a certain hubris. And we also think that if we think we're great, it means we think we're perfect. Now, let's take two tracks. You have Ricky 1 and Ricky 2. Ricky 1 thinks he's pretty good, like most of us do. And his sense of self, or sense of pretty good, is elevated when he's had a good day and reduced when he's had less of a good day. So now his sort of self-perspective goes like this. In fact, there were some interesting studies done in the United States a number of years ago where they found that because of the heavy influence of some of the core factors in life in the United States, people's perspectives of self weren't simply like this, they were like this, dramatically up and down. So let's assume Ricky 1 doesn't buy into B'Tselem Elokim Nivra Adam, and his perspective is somewhere between this, his sense of self, and this. I feel great, I feel the opposite. I feel super, I feel very much the opposite. Yeah? Ricky 2. Ricky 2 drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, read the Torah on this, struggled with the pasuk, with the verse, and worked hard to distinguish in his or her mind the difference between great and perfect, and now understands that HaKadosh Baruch Hu endowed the human being with unconditional greatness, regardless of what he or she does or doesn't do. Now, if Ricky too, working himself to own this perspective, he will never go like this in terms of his sense of self or love of self. Even with the strong social pressure to the opposite, at worst, he'll go like this, or maybe even like this. Feel good, less good, good, less good. Now, let's say Ricky 1, the guy who's going like this, is presented with a new opportunity, a career opportunity, a new chesed opportunity, someone who wants to befriend him. If he's up here, he will be in a state of mind to accept that position, to start that new business, to launch that new chesed organization. But if he's down here and he's on an off day, then he's going to walk past it. He's going to ignore it because he's not feeling that he's qualified to do it. So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell us? Out, not interested in this. I endowed the human being, God says, with unconditional greatness. It doesn't at all for a minute suggest perfection, but it certainly fights intensely against I'm good because I did good today, or somebody told me I'm good, and I'm not good because I feel lousy, because I stumbled today, or whatever. Ricky too, operating on this level, if he or she is presented with an opportunity for something new, to grow what he's doing, to take a risk, to start something, he can do it because his self-love is at a basically stable place every day, day in and day out. Now, as someone who taught this when I was celebrating birthdays with very different numbers, I'll tell you that this is one of the toughest things in life to maintain. But the alternative is unacceptable. The alternative which says, I'm going to swing with feeling good about me today, yucky about me tomorrow, and this and that and that and that and that, that is an anti-Torah perspective. Now, that doesn't mean that this perspective is easy to keep. It's very hard to keep. But step one here is, again, we talked about love, we talked about questions, we talked about beauty, we talked about time, we talked about happiness, we talked about prayer. We talked about several of those things that we keep in our lives in order to be feeling good and to be pumping and operating and living on a high level in terms of our self-love and self-esteem. So if we keep those things, we already have a leg up on this possibility. But getting comfortable with the perspective is the biggest step. It's the biggest step. And not getting comfortable with the perspective, to me, is the biggest challenge. You know, and the struggle we had then, and I'll repeat it, was that when we tried to teach young adults that they were unconditionally great, meaning if they spent the day or the week or the month doing nothing, even if they spent it doing nothing, they were no less great. And a person's greatness isn't something that he can control or he can dissipate or he can squander. It's a God-given fact, and I can't change it, thank God, and I won't change it. So, for those of us who are at whatever stage of life we're at, it's essential that we remind ourselves, B'Tselem Elokim Nivrati. Now, I was created in God's image. God is an omnipotent being. extraordinary power. He didn't have to do it that way. He already set me up to be the leading element of creation. He didn't have to state this, but he did. And to the extent that we reclaim this, it means that there's never an end to the possibility. Never. How could there be? There's never a winding down. There's never to enjoy and build new horizons in my life. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. There's a very interesting derush on the first pasuk in the Torah, first verse in the Torah. So we say that in Pshat, when something is clearly stated in the Chumash, it is what it is. And a lot of the Chumash is written in a very straightforward, structured, logical way. But then HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes out of his way, so to speak, to, in certain cases, repeat something, or to add excess words, words that are not straight pshat, that are not absolutely direct, words that are extra by design. Now, the first pasuk in the Torah, the first verse in the Torah says, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In this period called Reshit, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, if any of us was writing that verse, and we had this discipline to pshat, to writing something in a straightforward way, we would simply say, Bereshit bara Elokim shamayim va'aretz. In this period called Reshit, God created heavens and earth. We wouldn't say, in this period called Reshit, God created the heavens and the earth. But it gets even more confusing because it's et hashamayim, et haaretz. The ha, the hey in the beginning is not meaningless. Essentially, what God wrote is, in Reshit, God created the heavens and the earth. What does the mean? What it means, our rabbis say, is, well, there were other things created when God created the core elements of life. What were they? They were the tools for man to excel. Things like fire, and some of the other rabbis talk about other tools. And the extra psukim, the stretching out of these first handful of words, was meant to establish a very direct order of things. God starts creation, man continues it. God has the overarching tools, man has the direct tools. So no matter what we do, we can't get away from this fabulous place that we sit in the universe and in this ongoing, evolving, exciting thing called creation. To the extent that HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes out of his way to add extra words in the first verse of the Torah to make it clear to us that the tools that we will need forever are at our disposal. Okay, so far? Good. So, first thing for today that I want to suggest that we all begin to get comfortable with is this notion of that we are created b'tselem Elokim, in God's image, that there's an inherent, unconditional, impossible to destroy greatness in each person. It's forever and ever and ever and ever. Now, you'll ask me the question, well, what about evil people? And what about murderers? One of the klalim, one of the principles that the Torah works by is we're going to set general parameters for most of the world. You want to ask me a question about a murderer, about a Hitler, about whatever, we can talk about that question in another context. But in terms of the parameters by which the overwhelming amount of humanity exist by, this is the core one. So yeah, I'm going to have a Hitler 1 in a billion, true, and people like him, but do they break my model? No. My model is for all of the others that are built by it. Good? Everybody okay so far? I am great. I am great. Get used to it. Even, no less important, teach it to your children. Teach it to your children so they will understand their opportunity. They will understand their opportunity. Okay. And there's another important element that goes along these lines. And really, it can be mastered once we've mastered the first. And it's built for us into our lifestyles by a few different exceptionally interesting laws in the Torah. The first is Shvi'it, and the second is Yovel. Now again, the Torah assumption was that everybody was living in the land of Israel, right? Torah was going to be realized in the land of Israel. In fact, there are so many halachot that are strictly tied to the land that obviously are all about the development of us, because the whole Torah is about the development of us. So what's one of those key principles based on which our life in the land and the life of Torah is built? That's the concept of Shvi'it, which means every 7 years, there's a complete cessation. Actually, every 6 years. We plow, we work, we do for 6 years. And in year 7, I'm sorry to use this term, but there's an extended lockdown. The entire economy, or almost, an ancient economy was overwhelmingly agrarian. It was overwhelmingly agricultural. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, in year 7, nobody serviced their fields, what are you talking about? We're living with a shutdown for 3 months, not even, 2 months, 2 months. And it's extraordinarily hard. And people are reacting in all types of ways. Wait a second. Guess what, everybody? The lockdown is for 12 months. And you know what? You're going to have another lockdown like this 6 years from now. How does that sound? That's the notion of Shvi'it. And guess what? It goes further. Because every 7 cycles, there's going to be that 7th year, which is the lockdown year, so to speak. And then there's going to be the Yovel year, in which case every asset goes back to its original owner. Wow. What does that mean? No hard assets? Can't own that building forever? That's right. Because at a certain point in time, everything goes back to the family to whom it was given in the very early stages of the Chalukah Ba'aretz, of the separating of the land in the land of Israel. Wait a second. What does this mean? I'll tell you what it means. It something when we were starting out in business, it was a very interesting perspective, and I think in certain circles people still hold to this, and that is that a CEO, the head of a company, should fire himself or herself every 5 to 6 years. The guy could have started the business, the gal could have been the primary mover in the business, now is running a successful company. Every 5 or 6 years, fire yourself. What are you talking about? Yeah, because as good as you are, you're probably stale. Wow. Amazing. You know what? If I scratch my head a little bit, I go back to this Torah concept of Shvi'it. I go back to this concept of an absolute hiatus every 6 years. So let's see where we are at this point. We've said that the human being has an unequivocal endowment of greatness. We coupled that by reiterating what we said in the past, that the human being has an emphasized, maybe overemphasized, highlighted role in creation to continue to grow and continue to further God's creation. Now we're adding that every 6 years, everybody's got to check out, walk away from everything he or she has done, watch it lay fallow, and think and learn, and do no work for an entire year. Wow. Wow. Now, for those of us who have now recently experienced this lockdown, I know for me, it's the first time in my life I can actually begin to understand Shavuot. I was never able to get my head around it, but now I can, because I've realized that over the last couple of months of lockdown, I've reconnected with so many of the important things in my life. Believe it or not, and I say this with full disclosure, other than the pain and the tragedy that this has brought, and that's real, I'm not mitigating that at all, I have found immeasurable happiness in this lockdown. This platform is one of the reasons why. Because it's allowed me to reconnect to me and to remind myself of who I am and what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me, and the fact that every day is brand new, altogether brand new. So let's build our model. A, Tselem Elokim Nivra Adam. Man was built in God's image. Again, we're assuming the Kli, the self-love, the unconditional love, which ain't perfect for nobody, is somewhat in place, and that we've put things in our calendar to maintain that level of self-love. Next, we're going to become comfortable with just chucking it all every X number of years. Now, how do you chuck it all? For some people, they walk around from that business or chesed organization, they walk away from it. Other people might not have a choice. God may have said, you are stilted, you are stuck in this position, you are going to be terminated. You're going to lose your job. What happens, God forbid, when we lose a job? Oh man, now what am I going to do? Wait a second. God, right? Me and God. Doesn't God want the best for me? Is that just a toy? Is that just a sketch? It's not. It's absolutely true. It's real. So if you lose the job, it's your Shavuot. It means it's time to take the time off, to assume the lockdown, so to speak, to introspect, to reclaim that notion of absolute greatness that God endows in us, and to think about and get moving on the next steps. That's what we're doing here. That's where we are. That's what we should be doing. Now, in order to make this happen, you know what? Let's open the floor for some questions. Anybody?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay. You're assuming that the man who lost his job is a hardworking man and is doing the best he can, and he loses his job. What if there's a lazy man that's not doing his work and he's just, loses his job? Could he turn and say, oh, well, Hashem didn't want me to have this job, I should start introspecting?
Right. And so it's a good question. So yeah, you're right. If a guy is deliberately ruining his opportunity, he doesn't fit into our model. I think that's the minority, but you're right. If someone has an opportunity and deliberately doesn't want to live by that opportunity, yeah. But most people are not like that.
I always find that people blame everything on Hashem. Oh, well,
yeah.
that's what Hashem
I'm not
wants.
saying blame it on Hashem. I'm saying like this. I'm saying HaKadosh Baruch Hu sets up certain frameworks and models for us. Those frameworks will work very well for the majority of well-intentioned people. But you're right. If somebody wants to kill his opportunity, God's not going to stop him from killing it. You're absolutely right. Good. Other questions? We're okay with this?
One more.
Yeah. Okay.
One more. Doesn't Pirkei Avot say, "Kol Am Yisrael yesh lahem chelek la'olam haba"? So does that apply to, which means that everyone is entitled to a part of Olam Haba? So does that mean that everybody murderers, killers,
So,
robbers.
so
Just
it's qualified. It means everybody is entitled. Doesn't mean they get it. Everybody's entitled. Everybody has a piece to start, but might throw it away. That's essentially how we understand it.
good.
Good. Thank you, Sarah. Any other questions up until this point? Everybody's cool with this? So in other words, everybody on this screen is ready to undertake the commitment to reinstill in themselves the notion of their unequivocal greatness. Correct? Okay. Jane, what do you say? What? You're okay with it? Yeah, you're okay? Okay, great.
To a point. I mean, where you don't become an ego, you know.
Beautiful. See
Yeah.
that? I know Jane for a long time. Why do you think I picked her? I know her. We worked together many years ago. It was so great having somebody of this intellectual capacity work with me. It was a great time.
Thank you. I
So,
felt the same.
and I knew what she was thinking. I knew what she was thinking. So that's the thing. So here's where it is. Here's where it is. And it's important. We mentioned this in one of the other classes, but it's worth repeating. The last person who will consider himself or herself, the last person who will have hubris, the last person who will be arrogant, the last person who will look down on another human being is the person who is instilled with this perspective. I want to make that point again. The last person who will take on hubris behavior, the last one is the one who knows he's great. You know who the arrogant people are? Who the people who strut their stuff inappropriately, who express hubris? We know this from our own teaching. We know this from a gazillion studies, right? They're the insecure people. Secure people, self-loving people are never narcissistic. They're never arrogant, and they never have hubris. You got that? This is this Western thing that everybody uses to squander this key Torah value. You know, it's a very interesting thing. Our Kabbalistic rabbis say a fascinating thing. They say that a person's neshama will be influenced by the country in which he lives. It was a bombshell when I first heard it. What are you talking about? My neshama is my neshama. My neshama belongs to God, lent to me, part of God. So I'm living in America, or I'm living in Brazil, or I'm living in Chile, or I'm living in England. So what? Isn't my neshama my neshama? Rabbis say no. They say the neshama will be impacted positively or otherwise by the country we live in. Now, we live in one of the greatest countries in the world, right? United States, one of the greatest countries in the history of the world. But the huge negative in this country, in the social fabric, is just this issue. People have low self-esteem. And because of that, you see a remarkable level of arrogance and hubris. Remarkable, mind-boggling. It's actually mind-boggling. Every time I think I've seen the hubris to top all hubris, the narcissism to top all narcissism, somebody bumps into my life who just blows the whole thing away. Now, Jewish people, we need to reclaim who we are. That great sense of pride in what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave me and who I am and what I've built with it. And that pride yields strength and confidence, never having to resort to hubris, never having to chase arrogance. When I see an arrogant guy, I say, wow, this guy is so insecure. So I want you to keep playing that in your minds, because we've been conditioned that proud people are arrogant people, that proud people have ga'ava. It's the exact opposite. In fact, people mix it up by adding on another misimpression, What is that? They say that, well, wasn't Moshe Rabbeinu the most anav person that ever lived? That's right. And what does anav mean? It doesn't mean meek. It doesn't mean weak. It doesn't even mean humble. Anybody know what anav means? Arena, what does it mean? You remember? Anybody remember? Okay, I want to be crystal clear with what anav means. Anav means open, curious, willing to learn, willing to grow. If you for a minute, read the Torah and Moshe Rabbeinu's fierceness and strength and power and courage in confronting not only the Jewish people, but confronting God himself. The last thing you're going to say is that he was humble, he was meek, he was miskin. Shtuyot, nonsense. He was one of the most powerful people who ever lived, and he expressed his power. What does anav mean? Anav means that a person has the self-love, the self-confidence, and the pride to be curious and open, to be a perpetual student. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu the teacher of our time? Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, our rabbi, our teacher. Why? Because he was the most anav person of all time. What does anav mean? It doesn't mean meek. It means open and curious and responsive and flexible. How can I be open and curious and responsive and flexible? Only if I'm confident. Only if I have self-love. Only if I appreciate my greatness. Because people who are insecure aren't open to change. They're not open to new ideas. It's too unsettling. They're afraid. They're so scared of everything because they're so insecure. Judaism says, yeah, but B'Tselem Elokim Nivrata. You were created in my image, God says. Don't apologize about it. Be very proud. Be forever proud. You know, it's very interesting. I'll add one more thing. It's very, what if a person says, can I ask a dumb question? You know what the Torah says on that? The person violated an Aveirah. What Aveirah did they violate? Anybody can unmute. What Aveirah, what sin did a person violate if he or she says, let me ask a dumb question?
They said dumb. The dumb part. Because they said every question is worthy of being a question.
Right. Good, but beautiful. Yeah. But what sin did they commit? You're right, but what sin did they commit?
They think they're dumb.
What's that?
They think they're dumb.
Exactly. Beautiful, sir. They spoke Lashon Hara against themselves. They spoke Lashon Hara on themselves. You're not allowed to do that. So you're not allowed to say, I have a dumb question. Not allowed to say it. Because you know what? It takes its toll on you. Like you said, Marsh, no question is a dumb question to begin with, obviously. So when a person says something like this, they're speaking derogatorily about themselves. We don't allow that. That's not something we do. So, A, B'Tselem Elokim Nivra Adam. I am great. You're all great. Like it or not. Get used to it. To the extent that you can internalize it, you will become more proud and more strong. You will never be arrogant. B, I personally believe that Corona was a huge injection of God's thoughts, will, into the ongoing process of the world. I don't think this is the last of the interruption to the laws of nature. I hope and pray that it's the last one that comes this way. But to the extent that we were all grounded, it resonates very similarly to Shavuot, to that year of pause, to the Shemitah year. It resonates even more similarly in certain respects to the Yovel year, when people literally had to walk away from just about everything they had. We had a tiny version of it. But what does it do? If you add it with 0.1, it means that a person is forced to re-engineer himself or herself, to recreate, to find a new direction, to start again by design. It's what we want. It's a good thing. It's a great thing. And it's something that we shouldn't be afraid of. We should embrace. Because back in the day, and God willing soon, again sometime soon, when Mashiach comes and we're all in the land of Israel together, then we're going to have these periods again when the CEO gets fired at the end of year 6. Great. And what does that mean? If he's got that sense of self-greatness, he's very comfortable with it because he can remake his life without any problem. I want to close with one other point. We and some of us learned this together in the past, and it's worth repeating. Hi Viv, how are you? Thank you for joining us. It's worth repeating, and that is that we understand that the human being has an opportunity to reconnect to the greater forces, the greater intellect. And we understand that depending on how a person grows, his opportunities are more extensive or otherwise in connecting to the all-knowing, to this unlimited area of knowledge and understanding. One of the things that's available to all of us, and some of us have learned this before, is the following. At night, every night, part of our neshama breaks off and goes up to the heavens, let's call it, and has the opportunity to hang around, to hobnob with the elements of God, the absolute knowledge that is God. And generally speaking, that piece of us comes back with great insight. And generally speaking, should we harvest that insight, it would go a long way to helping us realize this Tselem Elohim perspective about each of us. So, we talked about clearing the deck every night with the Kiryat Shema. We talked about that self-affirmation, self-empowerment that happens with the Modeh Ani. The next thing we need to add to the mix is the morning harvest, which means each morning I've reminded myself of my unconditional greatness. Again, not perfection, but greatness. I've reminded myself of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's faith in me, an absolute backing of me. Now what I do is I take some time with a pencil or a phone or whatever you're most comfortable with to ask a couple of key questions on what's going on in my life on a personal and professional level. What would I do? What about an answer to this question? 2 or 3 questions, that's all. It could be about personal or family challenge, could be about personal opportunity, could be about a career or chesed challenge, could be about an opportunity. And whatever comes to mind, I write it down. No editing, no qualifications, just write it down. And I call that the morning harvest. And what I've seen over many, many years is that the insights that we pick up in that foray at night that our neshama has, on whatever level it has, are irreplaceable insights. And invariably, they're forgotten a few hours after they're given to us, if they're not recorded. Now, some people say, and I'm okay with that also, that, I don't know, if the neshama breaks off and goes up to the heavens and connects to the almighty knowledge and so on, I don't know, some people are not so comfortable with that. They say it's a subconscious speaking. And from what I've read, I'm very comfortable with that as well. It could be my subconscious speaking and offering me great insight. In either case, the insight is there and should be harvested. So here again, the way we start our day has immeasurable influence on how that day plays out. If I start my day with the reminder, Nivrati B'Tselem Elokim, I was created perfect. I'm sorry, great, but not perfect, but great, invariably so. B, that greatness goes to an extent where when back in the day, and with God's help immediately soon, I would be forced to walk away completely from what I do and what defines me, at least on a career level, with Shemitah and Yovel, and remake myself. That takes a great level of sense of self to do so. And one of the tools that enables that new growth, regrowth, greater growth on a daily basis is the morning harvest, which simply says, ask a few general questions about things in your life at this point in time and write down anything and everything that comes to mind. And you look at it a couple hours later. Some days I write, and some of you have heard this from me more than once. Some days I write a page, some days I'll write several pages. And invariably, the information is very valuable and it's indicative of a greater possibility of knowledge and understanding that in my typical sense, in my average day-to-day attentiveness and clarity, I wouldn't have achieved. Good. Well, anybody have any thoughts or questions? We'll unmute for a few minutes and then we'll wish you all a Yom Yerushalayim Sameach and Shabbat Shalom.
Same to you. Same to you. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thanks a lot.
Great. Nice to see you all. Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. Good things. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Always.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.